Hello, welcome to the Power of the Journey podcast. My name is Abiodun, your host, and of course today we're having Adeyinka Adegbenro join us today as a guest, and I think it's very interesting. So I'll probably start with a story. We spoke sometime in 2019 of December, and I think we had a very interesting conversation, and then we hadn't spoken, in over 10 years, and just before then, and it was quite interesting what we spoke about. And this is something I've always wanted to do, trying to tell stories, about people and about things, and I get a sense that people would be able to learn from these things. And when we had that conversation, I think for me that basically validated what I always thought in my head, wanting to help people tell their stories, and the belief that others would then learn from it. But before we go any further, I want to take on this, just read this quote from Cleo Wade. So Cleo Wade is an American poet and activist, and she says in one of her books, if you are grateful for where you are, you have to respect the road that got you there. And so really, Yinka, we're going to be talking about how you sort of transition from where you were to where you are now. And so, just for introduction, Yinka is a teaching assistant with the Northern Illinois University in the US of A. And so, I think one of the interesting things that got me to try to reach out to you one time was, I went through your LinkedIn and I noticed that you had a third class from the University of Lagos, in Nigeria. And, I think I knew this back then. But I think what was surprising for me was that I noticed that you put it on your LinkedIn. But even way better than that was that I then saw that after a couple of years, you went back to school and you came up with a first class in chemistry. So really, just tell us how that happened and basically everything in between. Over to you, Inga.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Abiodun, for having me, and it's a pleasure being here. And well, first of all, I have to thank God because everything has to do with God in the first place. So it was a long journey, and like from the quote you read, I have to be honest. It's you have to respect the journey that took you there. So that the reason why I just left it there, the fact that I got a third class from Unilag was to just kind of remind myself that I was at a place before and now I'm at a different place. So looking back, it makes me remember anytime I'm kind of like slowing down, I just look back, I'm like, hey, look back there. That was where you were before and look at where you are now. So I think that was where I left it. Yeah, just as a sort of a reminder of where I was and where I shouldn't go back to. So that was it.
Okay, I think it's very very important really, and the fact that we need to be reminded where we're coming from and what that has done to us. But I want you to take us through the decision to wanting to then go back to school even after coming out with third class really.
Yeah. So when I finished from Unilag then with the third class, my dad was quite influential in making helping me make this decision because I remember I was teaching in the school and I was earning about let's say $25-$30 a month. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was the amount I was earning. So my dad wanted to try to get another job, but it was quite difficult to get a job with a third class. So on this fateful morning, I remember he called me into his room and it was like, "You need to help me pay the DSTV premium. That's the cable TV subscription." So
Yeah.
it was like, "Oh, like let me ask you something." And I was like, "What?" He said, how much is the premium subscription? I said it's about $18 or so. And he said, okay, so let's assume that in the future you're going to get married. I said, yeah. And you're going to have kids? And I said, yeah. And they said, and you would like to have a DSTV in your house, of course. I said, yes, of course I would
Yes.
like to have it. So he said, so assuming that you're still doing this job, and you're earning about $30 a month, and you want the premium service because that's where you'll be able to watch the football matches and all.
Yeah.
So if you pay the premium service, what would be left of your salary? At that point, I knew where it was going, so I kept quiet. I stopped answering him. So he said, "Oh, you see, it's going to be $12, and you're still going to pay for school fees, and you're still going to pay for house rent, and you're still going to pay for food and everything." He said, "You know what?" And he said it in our language. He said, "Ronu soro," meaning that think about your life.
Yeah.
So that moment, it dawned on me that I needed to do something about my degree, because in Nigeria then or even till now, the degree is still a major thing. Like when you come out with a 2-1 and a first class, you get more opportunities than someone who comes out with a third class. So that conversation that morning was what spurred me on to like, okay, now you have to do something. And that was the moment I took the decision to go back to school.
So I mean, so obviously that was a defining sort of conversation and
Yeah.
moment that you had with your father,
Yeah.
and really, I think it applies to quite a lot of us. We have sometimes this defining conversation with people or even friends or family, and then that help us sort of realign, our perspective and let us see things in a different way. So subsequent to that conversation, really, what steps did you then take? Like, what did you, obviously you had still a lot to do on your own end, but, what did you really do and how did that change everything for you, that conversation?
Yeah. So that conversation made me like, the first thing I did was I told him like, okay, if I was going to go back to school, how was I going to finance the school? He said, "Don't worry. If you decide to go back, I'm going to pay for it." So the next step was to find schools. So I wanted to do medicine and surgery again. I'm like, okay, let me go and do medicine. He said, why that? That's 7 years. Like, no. So he said, okay, why not do chemistry? You did chemistry education for your bachelor, so do chemistry and go back to Unilag and prove to them that you can do better.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. So I wanted to go back to Unilag, and unfortunately for me, I couldn't get the JAM recitation done. And then secondly, my mom too was also kind of paralyzed, so we needed someone to be close to her at that point in time. So then along the line, Caleb University was like 40 minutes from my house.
Okay.
So that was where Caleb University came into place. So I was like, okay, my dad just said, okay, go to Caleb University and ask them the kind of courses they have and how they do those courses. So that was when I got there. And I learned they have industrial chemistry. And fortunately for me, they allowed me to use my bachelor's degree to sort of go into a direct entry program.
Okay.
So I didn't start from the first year, I started from the second year. So I just did 3 years, and those were the steps that I took then.
Fantastic. I mean, and it's quite interesting, really. In spite of some of the personal challenges that you sort of even had, you were able to really turn this around and summon that courage, because it's quite difficult sometimes to
Yeah.
acknowledge that we need to retrace our steps, really, and then try to find that thing really that will then make us who we are.
Yeah.
But also just not to sort of also focus on that sort of journey is how did you then come out with a third, so you came out with a third class really in University of Lagos,
Yeah.
and then you came out with a first class in Caleb University,
Yeah.
doing the same chemistry. So how did that happen? What happened that how were you able to come out with a first class
Yeah.
just a couple of years after, and then just prior you came out with third class? So how did that happen really?
Yeah, that's another beautiful story you just reminded me. So I'm going to go with my two spells in the university. So when I was in Unilag, the thing was that I got into Unilag at a very young age. I was quite young. In fact, I think I was even the youngest. I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, in our department then.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. So then I got into Unilag, and to be honest with you, I didn't have any idea of what maybe a first class or a second class or a third class was then. And my whole thought was like, okay, just go, just don't fail, don't have carryovers, and then you're good. And then so I had some of us, our friends then, maybe I'll keep their names. So we used to joke with ourselves like, oh, normal. We call it normal grade.
Yeah.
Kilogba. Oh, I got normal. The normal grade is E. So
Yeah.
it's like you didn't fail, but
But
and
you didn't pass either, right?
I didn't pass either, but we were not retaking the class. So at that point, I didn't know the extent of damage I was doing to myself. To be honest, I was supposed to finish with a 2-2,
Yeah.
but there was some result mismanagement or mishandling that, or some errors in my results that made me finish with the third class.
Yeah.
So that aside, so I'm just assuming the error didn't happen. So I didn't have really idea of what the university life was all about or what I was going to get from the university. So the second spell when I got into Caleb University, I was fortunate, very fortunate to meet my dean when I got in, because when you get in, you're to do registration, and the dean was supposed to like sign you into the department. And I must say that conversation with him was also one of the defining moments in what changed between my time in Unilag and my time at Caleb. So I got in there and we got talking, and he said, "Oh, you have a degree before?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, you have a third class?" I said, "Yes." "Is that why you're coming back?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay." Then he made this quote, and he made it in Yoruba. He said, "Tí Yorùbá máa jẹ ọ̀pọ̀lọ́, pé tó bá máa jẹ ọ̀pọ̀lọ́ kó jẹ èyí tó lẹ́yìn inú." Meaning that if you're going to do something, make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
So
that makes
that's
sense. And
yeah.
and sorry, just to cut you short there. So for our viewers that are not, that may be, not Nigerian or African. So basically, Yoruba is, one of the languages that we have basically in Nigeria. It's a southwestern part of Nigeria, and it's a very interesting and beautiful language. So so I get a sense that, sometimes we want to convey some of these things, but we can do it best in the language. And then, so that's what Yinka is trying to do. So basically, we're just going to translate what he's also said, in Yoruba. But so go ahead. Sorry for the
So he literally said, like, if you're going to do something all over again, make it worthwhile. Do it to the best of your abilities. And when he said that, then he told me, okay, this is how I believe you should study. After every class, when you get home, study what you did the whole day. Every day, study what you did at the end of the day. And then over the weekend, study everything you did that week. Wow. And to be honest with you, I took that, and I'm glad I took that advice. And to be honest, that was what I was doing. Every day after school, I would study. Even if I was on my phone and chatted till maybe 1 a.m. before I slept, I was still going to make sure I studied before I slept. And then over the weekend, I studied through everything we did. So initially, I felt like, when the courses start getting voluminous and we've done a lot, maybe deep into the semester, maybe that would be difficult to like adhere to. But I realized that when I started, even when going through, once you've been reading through the whole course every week.
Yeah.
So even when it gets more, you realize that when you're going through the previous one, you remember what you did. And I was surprised that, from my time in Unilag and my time in Caleb, when it was time for exam in Unilag, we would do night classes.
Yeah.
I know you remember that because I know we met a couple of times.
Those were interesting times, really.
So we would do night classes before exam, and for me, it was difficult for me to remember things that I just read the previous night. So I realized that I went from someone who would, if you are asked answer 4 out of 6, I would be able to answer. I was just being able to answer maybe 1 or 2. To somebody who would have 6 questions, and I would be like, I think I can answer the whole 6, and and
so you were spoiled for choice, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the word. It was a different thing entirely for me.
yeah,
Initially I wasn't confident with myself because there's this thing with you, like it's like, oh, you've been failing a lot in the past, you used to
yeah,
getting
yeah,
bad grades, and
yeah,
then all of a sudden you're you're scared and you get into the exam and you see like, oh, I can answer all of this.
yeah, yeah.
And it changed everything.
Mm,
Even to some courses that I didn't know, because I was very bad in physics and in differentiation and integration. I was really bad in them.
yeah.
I still ended up having a B.
Mm,
Like, and out of like 70 students who took the class, I think only one passed with an A. Then I
yeah,
think 12 had a B. And for someone who was bad with differentiation and integration, the course was like on ordinary differential equations. So I still had a B. So I was like, oh, so it means that if you put in the work, if you put
yeah.
in the effort,
You get the results.
you get the results. And
Yeah,
that was just the defining thing in my life.
yeah, yeah. And sincerely, I mean, this I think it's a very beautiful story. So
Mm.
I think two things here for me would be that the fact that you were basically you basically had very positive people in your corner
Yeah.
and people to help redirect you,
Mm-hmm.
from the point of your father
Mm-hmm.
and also the dean,
Yeah.
that in the school in Caleb, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed to have really done quite a lot of major changes
Yes.
in your outlook and how you saw things.
Yeah.
And I think additionally, from what you've also said, is the fact that you know things changed. You
Mm-hmm.
then had confidence in the fact that nothing was really difficult.
Yes.
When you put in the work,
Mm-hmm.
you get the results.
Yeah.
And so the things that you previously found very difficult, when you were in University of Lagos, coming out with the third class,
Mm-hmm.
these things were now a walk in the park, really,
Yeah.
because you then saw that. I mean, it's just basically follow this method, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was working for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important one, really, for everyone to just take out of this. The fact that sometimes we need positive people around us,
Mm-hmm.
and so when they talk about trying to get a mentor or a sponsor, I think these are very important conversations, and
Yes.
it's been highlighted here, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, some of us are, people like you also are lucky to have them just very close by, maybe family members and people that show concern for us. In
Yeah.
other cases, some of us would have to reach out and
Yeah.
then look for that mentor to just help us, show us that we're doing this thing this way, it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Do you maybe know any other way I could try? And I think these are very important sort of life hacks that we could sort of take on
Yeah.
and then apply to different spheres in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And I really like the way this conversation is going. And really, so at the point that you then came out with the first class, how did it feel? I mean, if I just want you to maybe try to go back to that time when you came out with the first class, and how you felt. What was it like, really?
To be honest, because I'm this kind of person who is I don't always I'm not always surprised by what I do. Like maybe like overwhelmed. I felt happy, and I think the greatest joy was with my family, like with my family and also the dean, because the dean was retiring, I think, that year. So it was like, oh, it came to me. I was like, I'm proud of you. Like, I'm glad you remember our conversation 3 years ago. I'm glad you
Yeah,
took that. And then my mom was really happy. It was low, like she was really, oh, thank God, African moms.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
so, but for me, it was just like, because to be honest, before I came to Unilag, I was like a bit close to an A student.
okay.
So I wasn't that, for someone who was 15 to get into university, you should know that it's
Yeah, I
not
mean,
like it was
you
the,
had to be brilliant, right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So I think I just felt like I retraced my step and maybe I just felt I could do more.
yeah,
So that was the thing then after that. So I just felt I could do more, I could do more. So I was happy on one side, but on the other side, I just felt like, okay, you're back to where you're supposed to be.
yeah. And then this is just a start, and that's
Yeah.
interesting, really, because right now, you're currently a PhD student in
Yeah.
Northern Illinois University.
Mm-hmm.
and and I see how far you've come. You've gone after that, the first class. So then
Yeah.
we were doing masters,
Yeah.
and then you're now doing your PhD.
Yeah.
How has that journey also been?
Yeah. So the journey, it didn't get any easier. I wouldn't say it's easier, but the decision to go back was actually what has been influencing this journey, because it was my during my time, I think it was my final year, that I realized that it was possible to go for masters abroad, and you would get like scholarship in front in like scholarship in the form of teaching assistantships and all. So you would literally not pay for school, and you would teach in the department where they would give you stipends. So to get that, it's not easy because you need to do some exams, of course. And then to maintain it is also not easy because you have to come here, and then you have to not just teach, but you also have to like go through your classes, and you should maintain like a form of good standing. Like we have a grade point average that you need to have to maintain it. So it's not like it got easier, but I would say the lessons I've learned from previous years have been what has been keeping me going so far.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely that's even more, way more interesting and sort of very fulfilling because the
Yeah.
level of confidence that you had even developed as you went along would
Yeah.
definitely obviously be coming into play here.
Yeah.
And so obviously I get a sense that some people might want to also reach out to you,
Yeah.
trying to also understand how you sort of doing what you're doing now with the PhD, and
Yeah.
we're going to obviously provide a link, your LinkedIn profile, and then
Yeah.
so people can reach out to you and ask questions. But I'm very happy with how this conversation has gone,
Yeah.
and really it just goes to show you, what the power of the journey is all about.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I always say that sometimes we're on a journey to sort of really discovering who we are because things change and different things happen. And so some of the things, defining things that has happened in your life has really just helped you in terms of where you are now.
Yeah.
And so maybe just as a closing point really is,
Yeah.
what are you looking up to? What are you looking at? I mean, now you're doing your PhD. I get a sense that you'll be done in maybe a couple of years. And so what is maybe next if you've given that some thoughts?
Yeah. My goal has always been to like make a positive impact. Whether it's making a new drug, or whether it's helping people. So the goal has always been to help people, because personally I think I would say my goal in life, even though we would say we want finance and we want money, but my goal in life has always been to impact as many lives as possible. So whatever I'm going to do next, to be honest, I haven't given it a thought yet of, let's say, what I want to do next in terms of helping people. But I know it will definitely has to do with helping people.
Yeah.
Just help people as much as possible achieve the best that they can.
And thank you very much. I think this definitely is a great way to start in terms of helping people. And obviously, when people see this and learn your story, is also a way to help them. For people that want to redirect themselves or maybe retrace their steps, I think this basically provides them that sort of validation to say that, anything that they want to do can happen. And thank you very much, Yinka, for gracing us with your presence.
No,
And as I
thanks.
mentioned, there couldn't be a better person to have started this podcast with us because, I mean, you basically sort of inspired, this podcast, as it were, because when I heard your story, I was utterly impressed. And for me, I was really moved because I understand, the power of stories and the power of journey and what, some people have had to sort of do and trying to get to where they are. And I believe that, it's never too late a time to retrace your steps or make changes.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. We really appreciate you. And I'm sure we'll be reaching out back to you very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Abiodun. I really
yeah,
appreciate
anytime.
that. And
Yeah,
it's an
anytime.
honor to be the first guest on your platform.
Oh, thank
It's
you
a
very
real
much.
honor, yeah.
It's a pleasure here. It's
Yeah,
a pleasure here.
thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. And that's the power of the journey. So we will be catching up soon. If you enjoy this podcast or YouTube video, I'd like for you to follow us, give us reviews, like and share with your friends and family. And you probably have folks that you probably just want to let it. And sometimes it's easier for people to learn from stories, right? Just share this with them, and then I believe that it's a very important story, and that really needs to be told. And I believe that people can learn from it. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye now.